Cool. Awesome. Yeah, to move on to the next question, kind of wanted to give students a little bit more of an idea of maybe what different roles, industries entail. So maybe you could go over like your current job responsibilities, maybe a typical day-to-day, if there is a typical one, and then maybe also what you like or dislike about it. I think we can just probably continue with the same order, assuming everybody has answers for each of these questions. If not, we'll just skip around. But I think everybody should have an answer for this one. So yeah, Nicole, if you want to start us off.
Yeah, so I think sort of in order to answer this question, I think like it's really important for me to sort of think about the things that I have really enjoyed, like throughout my time at Skyline and then throughout my time at UCLA. And some of the things that I picked up along the way were like, that I really enjoy coordinating and that I really enjoy communicating with people and sort of working on the people side. So at my current role at Bain, like I mentioned, I coordinate recruiting across different MBA programs in consulting specifically. So I organize recruiting from Haas, but I also work on the office level to try and recruit people from a lot of different schools across the country. So I guess my day-to-day sort of depends on what time in the season we're sort of in, but right now we're working on hiring for our general pool. So we're working on hiring full-time consultants. So I would say a lot of sort of consist of holding and coordinating interviews. So I sort of have to manage a lot of different members of the leadership team. I work really closely with partners and senior managers to sort of align their schedules along with our schedules and make sure that everything's prepped and primed for people to interview. So right now I'm sitting in on a lot of pre-wires and debriefs. So I'm definitely learning a lot about what it sort of takes to make it at Bain, what it means to be a consultant at Bain, and also communicating really closely with recruits and just sort of like listening to a lot of people's life stories, which is sometimes interesting, but sometimes a lot of fun. So it's definitely a combination of managing, coordinating, and listening. But that's sort of how my day-to-day has been recently.
Did you go over what you liked and disliked, or?
Oh yeah, sorry. So the thing that I like the most, I think in my current role is just getting to meet a ton of different people. I started fairly recently, so there's definitely been a steep ramp up to everything, but I've really enjoyed getting to meet like a ton of different people from different backgrounds, different levels of experience. It's definitely been very eye-opening. I've definitely learned a lot. The thing that I would say I liked the least, maybe, I would say is more of like the admin stuff. So I do have to like keep track of a lot of things. There's a lot of email writing back and forth, that kind of thing. Sometimes that gets a little bit boring just because you're not like super hands-on and you're not really talking to a lot of people at once. But I think like I'm super people focused. So that's definitely my favorite part.
Awesome. I like that phrase you mentioned earlier, prepped and primed. Sounds great. Anyway.
Nicole's is an expert over here.
She really is.
That's amazing. I remember when I met her in Skyline College, she's like a student. She's like, oh, I really want to go to UCLA. And it went from I really want to go to UCLA to I have already achieved that. Now here are my new goals. And here's how I'm achieving them. So, wow. I'm inspired already.
Wow, thank you.
We're all in awe.
Justin, day to day, and then what we like and what we don't like.
Yeah, like what job responsibilities day to day, what you like and don't like. Yeah.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah, so typically like the corporate finance function. Well, I feel like when you're at UCLA, you hear about consulting, you hear about banking, you hear about accounting. Typically, you don't go into corporate finance out of your undergrad. Typically, like you'll either go into accounting, you do 2 years in accounting and a Big Four, and then you'll go into corporate finance, or you'll go into banking. And some people will go into corporate finance, but I don't see it too often. But really the big difference between like corporate finance and accounting is the past, finance is future. So our three numbers are the budget, the forecast, and the actuals. And at the start of the year, we're building budgets for the full year. We're partnering across the business. We're analyzing the performance of actuals, and we're reforecasting based on those actuals. But really, it should be like 40% backward looking, 60% forward looking, and you should really be at the front of the business and being a true business partner. Because the worst thing you have is like a siloed finance partner. In finance, some people say like you don't even need a finance department. So and sometimes you'll have a business like they won't have finance, and then over time they'll say, okay, we need the finance function, because typically you have an analyst either like on the revenue side, expense side. You can have an analyst that's just doing capital expenditures, or just someone like that's focused on your balance sheet. So my experiences range around like across the P&L, across the balance sheet, across the cash flows, over my past almost like 6 years now. And a lot of my time, it really comes down to three things. You are dealing with your partnership. So if you're like sales focused, I've done sales finance before, you're dealing with the really cool sales guy that's selling software and closing deals and taking people to happy hour after they close their nice deal. Or you're like on the operating expense side and you're like working with engineers who want to go watch like Star Wars over the weekend with you. Or you'll be partnering with accounting. So like partnerships is one. Number two is your systems. I think this is something that I didn't really think about. I kind of overlooked before I go into the workforce. Like you actually have to have a strong knowledge on how to use different softwares and systems, because you'll be leveraging a lot of data. Everyone hears the word like big data, but data is really just rows and columns. That's what it comes down to. It can be stored into different locations. It's pulled, it's reconciled, it's manipulated, it's modeled. You layer different analyses on top of the model. You're pulling insights out of the conveyor belt with a crane. You're delivering those insights, those answers for your partners to make decisions off of. But not just make decisions, but also just take action. And not only just take action, but also make sure that they achieve and they're punching the ball through the end zone. So you're doing cartwheels you're doing end zone celebration dances. So there's a wide range of activities, but I try to just summarize that in that time frame. So I definitely love, those aspects of the job, like the systems, the partnerships, and then just like the analytics side of it as well, which is like would be the third component, like your brain. So that's been my world for the past six years.
Awesome, man. Graceland, if you want to dig over your experiences.
Sounds good. So I guess before I tell you about my job, because my job's kind of the work I do is very specific. So maybe I'll give you just quick background of how I got there. When I was at UCLA, I thought I was going to pursue the, pretty standard route of becoming a CPA. So had done like a small internship, an internship at a small like CPA firm for like a sole owner. Then I was lucky enough to intern at Hulu in accounting. And it was kind of through those experiences and honestly my coursework where I was like, this is not exactly for me. I need to figure out something else. So I was also kind of interested in the people side of things. So from there, decided to work at a startup formerly called X Consultants Agency, now called ECA Partners, which essentially helped to build a startup, which, places people who are former consultants into industry roles. So was doing like recruiting for them, business development, like managing financials. So doing a lot of like hands-on work. And then through that experience, I kind of said, I had, I was able to work on different parts of that startup within a like HR capacity. And I was like, you know what, I want to take this to kind of a different, I guess, see it from another perspective, and then work in human capital consulting. So from there, I started like looking at other companies that were doing human capital consulting. So like Mercer is probably one you guys have heard of, and then Aon, the company I'm at, does compensation consulting. So joined that the practice about a year ago, and then my role involves working with different, I guess, clients mainly in the life science and technology space to figure out how much their executives are going to get paid. So that's like cash as well as equity. And as much as straightforward as that sounds, it's like, okay, you guys just figure out how to pay people. It's very, very quant heavy work, especially the equity side when you're figuring out how much does a CEO get paid, because it's millions of dollars in stock. So on a day-to-day basis, I'm doing a lot of quant work. I'm kind of coordinating as well as working with my project manager, as well as like maybe the partners or whoever else I'm staffed with on a project. And in terms of what I think I like being able to understand the bigger picture of like, how does the industry work? How do people get paid? Because I have friends who come to me and say like, should I be making this much money or should I be making this? And I can kind of advise them or help them out, which has been really fun. And then in terms of what I maybe don't like as much, at times the work can be, you're working with a lot of clients at once, and it's quant heavy work. So, there's times where you're like, oh my gosh, I've been working in Excel so long, I'm so tired. And then also, second thing comes with working in, I think, a lot of, these professional services firms. It's not always going to be the standard like 9 to 5 or 9 to 6. At times, I'm working late. So sometimes the work balance isn't, always ideal, but you kind of know what you're getting into. So I would say that's probably maybe the negative side to it.
Awesome. Great answers there. I know some of you guys maybe covered this a little bit, but if you could expand, if you already went over it, and if you didn't go over it, if you could just address it. When did you kind of decide that you wanted to work in the field that you're currently in? And how did you sort of go about making that decision? Furthermore, did you always know you were interested, or did you sort of fall into it? And again, we're going to go in the same order because I'm assuming everybody has an answer to this. So Nicole, if you could start us off.
Yeah, so kind of like I mentioned, I always sort of knew that I wanted to go into something that was very people focused. And I think a lot of that came from like some of the experiences I had mostly at UCLA. I was a part of the mock trial team. I did a lot of sort of similar things. So I kind of learned that I really enjoy both working on a team and also working with people. So I think that kind of navigated, where I kind of am now. But after I graduated, I, of course, graduated in 2020, not in the best job market, as you guys probably know. Like it was just a crazy time and no one really knew it was happening. And so I had the opportunity to work for a startup, sort of very early stage startup. And I decided to take that and just do like a lot of really cheap work. But I think if anything, it gave me a really good opportunity to sort of learn about the things that I like and the things that I don't like. And at the end of that, I sort of realized that although working in a startup is really awesome because you're sort of on your own and you kind of have to find your way through and you're like discovering things on your own and you're learning a lot, you're also not able to take advantage of a lot of resources that a larger company may have. So I think after that, I kind of was pointed in a different direction slightly, and I realized like I would really love to work at an organization or at a place that can provide me with a lot of like really crucial resources and can just be a really great learning experience. So I think that's kind of what led me to Bain and why I've just really been enjoying my role so far, is just because of like the culture and then the specific work that I do is kind of very much aligned with some of the things that I've sort of learned along the way. But at the same time, like I still don't really know what I want to be doing in the next few years. So I think like this is a great opportunity for me to discover some of the things that I'm interested in.
Awesome. Flav, do you want to give it a stab?
Yeah, so you're probably wondering like, 4 jobs, 6 different companies, and there's a story behind that. So my first role going into SaaS, it was just something that it was just an opportunity that was unique, like in San Francisco, where I'm currently at. SaaS, which stands for software as a service, or like Salesforce, like your biggest SaaS company. Yeah, it was something that was like interesting. It was new in 2016, so I went into that. There was like a lot of consolidation kind of going on in the market at the time, so I wanted to stay in SaaS because I actually love like learning about new technologies and how we're solving different problems and the wide range of outcomes that you're able to achieve with different use cases of software. But my prior CFO was like, "You're too early to be industry specific. Like, just try different industries." So then I wanted to go like learn more about like the hardcore finance. And the second company that I went to it was more cash flow based, because like software, like the cash flow is like it's not as rapid, it's not as frequent than you are like a financing company where like you're constantly like financing new different types of like renewable energy assets. And then that company was restructured. And then I was like, okay, I want to go larger, because those were two like 200 person size companies. So my third company was called Interpublic Group, which is like the third largest advertising agency globally. It's like, all right, I want to go like larger, get on the advertising side, the marketing side. But then I was like, all right, I was like, all right, I love technology, I love finance, but I just didn't know like what's that third piece that I was missing, because okay, like with this type of like advertising, you could think of advertising two ways. You can think the word advertising, oh, it's amazing. But sometimes I hear the word advertising, I also hear the word manipulation. And when I don't see like that social impact, like some of our clients like BMW and like J&J, but I'm like, wow, does one additional BMW that's sold out there really increase like social value by one additional unit? I couldn't convincingly say the word was yes to that. So that's what made me search for something that was more social impact focus. And I've always been interested in entrepreneurship. I did actually I was like a couple like a class away from like entrepreneurship minor, but I did like do like econ 73 A and B. I know, right? A and B, which is like social entrepreneurship, and like I did like two business competitions, one at Chapman University and one actually at UCLA, and then we went to Russia. I won the Russia one. I didn't win the Chapman one, but that's okay. So I've always been interested about that. But this company, I was thinking more, okay, how can I go social impact? And they're investing in education, they're investing in health, they're investing in immigration. So, and amongst a number of different other like social issues. So I was like, all right, this is much more aligned with what I want to be doing in my life. And they just got like, it's like a brain trust of people. Like one of the people that's leading our education investments, we partner with like the former US Secretary of Education, who's like an Obama appointee. Apparently like Obama was at like last year or 2 years ago's like company offsite in Washington. So I was like, okay, this is where I'm going to really be able to like support a big impact. But long story short, technology, finance, social impact, that's the composite of like what my passions are around.
Awesome. Graceland?
And then, sorry about this. If you don't mind, Justin, can you repeat the question just so I answer the entire question?
No, I know you're the last one. You hear it. It's been the longest since you heard it. Yeah, so I was just curious, like, when did you decide you wanted to work in the field that you're in, and how did you make that decision? And then the follow-up is, did you always know you were interested, or did you sort of fall into it?
Yeah. So I think I touched on this a bit in my last answer. So for me, I think, when I was taking my coursework at UCLA, specifically in like accounting, I just felt like this is not exactly what I want to do. And I saw that more so in the internships when I was actually like putting my work into practice. So from there, I think it was the summer between my junior and senior year, I started like looking at other like reaching out to people and trying to figure out like, what are other like opportunities or roles I can take. So I ended up doing like 2, I think, part-time like internships in HR during my senior year, like during the week, just to like kind of learn about learn about the industry and kind of see, is this, I guess, function something I'm interested in. And that kind of is what led me into kind of partially what led me into taking my first role out of college. And I think even today, to be honest with you, and this is what I think this is honestly the case for everyone. Like, as you go into any role, you kind of learn what you like and what you dislike, and then how that, what you like and dislike is going to take you to the next, your next role. Like, so in my current role, um, do I think I'll be in my current role forever? Probably not, but I'm taking kind of learning what I like, am good at in my current role, and maybe what I don't like as much. I'm trying to kind of figure out, okay, after this role, maybe a few years from now, what is kind of that next step? So that's kind of how I got to where I am.
Awesome. For the next question, I'm not sure if it's necessary for everybody to answer. Maybe if you have like an anecdote in mind or a specific experience. I was curious, like, what it's been like, sort of, I mean, for some of you, it's been longer than others, but like what it's been like going from university where, everybody's more or less the same age, and you kind of all have this common experience to the workplace where everybody's, really coming from different places, different companies, you might have people with kids. How has that been? Was there like a sort of culture shock there? What that's been like? Does anybody have anything in mind to this question?
Yeah, I mean, I don't mind answering. I guess like just going into a firm where you're dealing with people who are literally at like so many different stages in their life. You have people who are just coming in from undergrad. You have people who are coming in from MBA programs. You have people who are coming in from a different industry or coming in with an advanced degree. There's like senior managers and partners. So there's people like completely different levels and stages in life. And you're like meeting everyone at once, and it's kind of crazy. But I think it all kind of comes down to the culture that you're sort of going into. And if the culture is one where, the company embraces, connection and embraces those conversations, then you're going to have a great time because everyone's willing to help and everyone's willing to talk to you. And you're just like learning a ton of things, and you're sort of getting like really interesting input from a lot of different sort of directions. At the same time, I was honestly incredibly fortunate to be able to work on an entirely female team. I don't think that's something that you can say very frequently, especially when you're working in consulting, but I sort of have the privilege of doing that. And everyone I work with is incredible and have really cool life stories. So I think it definitely depends on like what the company's culture is, but if the culture is one that's like super open and just good overall, then you're going to have a great time meeting different people, even though they might not be the same age or the same gender. So I don't know. It's been cool so far for me.
I see that people background creeping in there with the culture emphasis.
I love that. We got
Love to see that.
Always.
The DEI, Nicole, what is diversity? Is it diversity, equity, inclusivity?
Yes, DEI.
DEI, I like it. Yeah, I'll quickly answer Justin too. It's so cool, honestly, like working with older people. I feel like because I gotta have like a director, like, all right, I gotta go coach my kid's basketball game, or like my current director, his baby started crying. He's like, okay, hold on, he had to go pick his like 12-month-old, and he's talking to me about like how we just did a deal to Kahoot selling like one of our portfolio companies, and he's got his baby like crying. So it's just like really cute to have like to just like see how human these people are. But I think the only like challenge that a lot of you will face, and I'm sure Gracelyn and Nicole already face this. If not, they probably will. When there's that age gap, there will be times where you'll feel like this person just thinks just because I'm younger than them, I don't know as much. And it's a challenge. And the first thing you have to do is like always empathize. Like, okay, like it's easy for me, like, oh, what, like, why do they feel that way? But people, well, okay, the three most powerful words in business is I don't know, I was wrong, I am sorry. And I think this goes to the I don't know. Like, it's tough for someone who's older to like tell someone who's younger, like, oh, I don't know what to do. But there'll be times where you'll know like how this works, especially when it comes to like technology and software. Like the internet, it's only been around since actually around my age, like 90, 92, 93. And like you've got folks that are like 50, 40 that you're working with. So we grew up with the internet. Like we know how to use software, we know how to use technologies, and our fingers on the keyboard, sometimes we'll be way quicker at doing things that they will. They're like, oh wait, we're click here, click there. So there'll be times where you'll face that. And it will just require a lot of patience with you, where you'll have to say, yes, speedrunner like that. You'll have to be able to like say, okay, no, like this, I know like you may disagree with me. You don't have to say just because I'm younger, but I don't disagree, but really just be objective and like showing your, proving your point, screen share if you need a screen share, but just something to be aware of, and something to always manage when you're working with your older peers.
Awesome. Graceland, do you have thoughts on that? If not, we can just move on. It's fine.
Yeah, no, I agree with both of you, in the sense of like, there's going to be one, it's company culture. That's a big deal, whether you're working with people all your age or whether you're working with people who are much older than you. So that's one thing. And then two, like you had just mentioned, is that, like there are going to be times where, when you're coming in and you're new to a company or you're young out of college, there's going to be people who underestimate you or who don't think you know that much. And then sometimes it's going to be where you might actually know something, like when it comes to technology, you might be better at this than someone who's much more senior in their career, right? Just because of how our generation is with tech. So the advice I would give to anyone on this call who's like young in their careers is to know that like every day at work, you're not going to know everything, but if you can show up and you can show up and be like, you can show up with a good head on your shoulders and you can show up polished, and be open to like asking for feedback and, that kind of a thing. I think you can kind of gain that respect of people who are older than you, even if, there's that age gap, with people you're working with.
Awesome. That's
Grace
great.
got me fired up, Justin. Grace got me fired up right now. I'm ready for work
Man.
tomorrow.
Well, go off, Liv. Yeah, for the next question, I don't think everybody necessarily has to answer either, but definitely if something comes to mind, feel free. I was curious, like, you hear all the time, or you will hear all the time, that networking is a huge part of landing, your first role, your first internship. How true is that for you guys in any of the roles, honestly, but maybe especially like the first one? Or if not, you can talk about any of them, honestly. Just like would love to hear more about like any story involving networking.
And I guess I can go, and I have like, I guess, two different perspectives on this, just because like I have my own personal perspective, and then I also have a perspective coming from someone who works in recruiting. So I kind of deal with that side of things. So for me personally, networking definitely played a big hand in the role that I have right now. I was sort of able to get a referral and get an interview that way, and that was my way in, essentially. I mean, I still had to go through the entire interview process, but I think if it wasn't for that initial introduction and that initial referral, there's probably no way I would have done the interview. So I think it's really, really crucial to be meeting with people. From sort of my perspective on the role and on the job, networking is incredibly, incredibly helpful, especially if you're trying to break into consulting. And I don't mean that, like, some people say that you should try like cold emailing, cold calling, trying to connect with people on LinkedIn. That doesn't necessarily always work. There's sometimes better ways to go about it. Specifically in consulting and specifically with Bain, I can say that there is a dedicated recruiter that is sort of staffed to recruit and network with people specifically at UCLA. And if you can kind of take advantage of those types of resources that are available on campus, I think that's sort of your best way to go about it. And I think it's honestly extremely crucial to be able to meet with people and to talk with people, and not just to land a job and not just to land an interview, but to also better understand what it is that you're interested in. And I think that's pretty helpful. So that's kind of like the two different perspectives that I have on that.
Awesome. Anybody else have thoughts on this? Otherwise, we can move on to the next question.
Yeah, I'll share. So I think I would say recruiting excuse me, not recruiting, networking is very important when it comes to, I think, one, being able to talk to people to understand more about like different roles and what, they do and what they're interested and not interested in. And when it comes to kind of playing a part in getting, your job or internship, I think from at least my experience, there's been a couple, internships and my past job that I had that, to be honest, I just applied online or went to the career center, and that's kind of was my first step. But I will say that if you are interested in a specific either like a role or company, networking is huge and it is so important. That's how I got my first job. And not my first job, my current job at Aon was reaching out to someone. Actually, he's a UCLA alum, graduated in 2020. So he's younger than me. He's like, we're hiring. I reached out to him, and within a day, I was in the process because of him. So it goes to show that, I think networking is important. And sometimes it means just asking someone, more about it can mean, networking can mean talking to someone, and sometimes it means asking them to refer you to a company, and sometimes networking is not that. Sometimes it's just calling someone to ask them more, and you're not asking for anything in return, such as like, a referral or whatever. But then with that being said, I tell people networking is the first step, but it gets your foot in the door. But after that, you have to do the work to actually, kind of nail your interviews to get whatever you're looking for.
Awesome. Flav, did you have thoughts, or we can move on if not?
The only distinction that I'll make too, in my own professional experience, is make sure you always have something of value that you can provide. And like you're dating with someone, you just want someone who's gonna take, like takers, or like you can easily identify the taker, the person who shows up at the party that didn't bring any alcohol or didn't bring any food, and they're just like, hey, I'm just here to take. So think about that person, and don't be that person when you go up to the cocktail networking party. Like, make sure it's like, hey, this is what I can do for you, and oh, and by the way, this is what I could get. This is what I need from you. So it's always like networking. Like there's also two things. There's two things. This is what I can give you, and if this is, can I ask this from you? And what was I gonna say? Oh yeah. I was gonna say, there's the line like network is your net worth, but I'll also say that be the person that people want to know. So you can't just be like, hey, like I'm a really cool guy, I got no skills though. Like you gotta have skills. So make sure you're always getting those skills up to date, so you're the person that people want to know.
Awesome. Great advice. Cool. I think for the next question, everybody in theory should be able to answer. So we'll go through the same order. So the question is, as transfers, we sort of have a unique set of challenges in that we have to learn how to navigate academic and professional life all within like that 2-year span. So just kind of curious, like how you guys individually went about this, and we'll go through the same order. So Nicole, if you want to start.
Yeah, a really good question. I think, first of all, I will say that I think all of you guys are super fortunate and that you decided to transfer to UCLA, because UCLA definitely does give you really unique opportunities as transfers, where I don't think a lot of other people at different universities could say the same. So definitely, I think for me it was definitely not the simplest transition. Like I definitely dove into it head first, and that was very challenging, just because I decided to take on a lot at once. And I didn't really take the opportunity to really like stand back and look at the bigger picture and really understand like what it is that I need to do to get from point A to point B. So if there's any advice that I could give you that I didn't personally do, it's like, do not rush into things because you don't have that much time. So it's really important to think about all the resources and all the opportunities that are available to you. And then also think about where you'd like to be in the next year, in the next 2 years, and maybe like go through and make like a really, basic path for yourself, a little basic like guide for yourself, because I didn't do that. And I think like about a year in, I was like, oh my God, like, what am I doing? I need to stop all of this madness and like get back on track. So, I think that's something that transfers unfortunately have to deal with, just because we have 2 years and not 4 years. So we're sort of, everyone else has the like year or two to mess up and like do whatever. You guys kind of have to, I don't know, think about it a little bit more. So that's kind of the advice that I can give from my personal experience.
Awesome. It's always great to see the new transfers frantically adjusting as I watch Nicole do that herself. Flav, if you like to chime
Yeah.
in.
So Justin, it was how do we manage our academic and professional experiences?
Yeah, like within the 2 years, like mostly the time span aspect of that.
Yeah, honestly, I did such a terrible job at that. I'll be completely frank with you. I've like made like there's a list of mistakes I've made in my life. Me preparing for like my professional career is one of them. So just because like the academic rigor that is required, like it's a big transition. As like the folks that are already there know. And like you want to have fun too. Like I've never like I rarely the only time I went to LA was with my family to Disneyland. So I was like, shoot, I want to have a good time. Like I wasn't really having that much like skyline. You're pretty locked in. So just kind of focus on having fun and studying, also being involved in like campus activities. But it was more so like my second year that I really started to ramp it up, because you see people like my roommate was leaving every day in his suit. Like I'm going to these recruiting events. He was way better than I was. And yeah, I think what really helped though is just like find that cohort of people that are going to the recruiting events, just so you can make it a collective effort. Like everyone's working together in it too. Like it looks like there's like everyone's competing for the same job, but people are also like collaborating too, especially with your close friends. And then the last point I'll make is make sure you have like a strong connection with like someone who has recruiting experience. Look, like Nicole's telling us about Bain Company. So like some people think like, oh, you're my resume, the interview is so easy. Like this is like some people like full-time jobs and full careers. And my best friend, Andrew Carroll, went to UCLA. He's like a managing director recruiter. He's actually a year younger than me already, but he's excellent he opened up his own office out in like Century City for his organization. But like when I was applying for this job, just because like in the VC field, it's like such a challenging interview process, like interviewing and resume, like those are like they're complex. The mechanics for building those steps and those processes, like they're really really complex, and people spend every day building those skills. So if you think that like for me as a corporate finance guy, like if I think that, oh, I can do that, like I have this huge ego, like I did it all by myself, like nobody does it all by themselves. So definitely make sure you partner with someone in that field.
Awesome. Gracelyn.
Yeah, so when it comes to, sorry about that. So I think when it comes to being a transfer, yeah, there's definitely like challenges when it comes to like that you kind of come in, you're usually like most people like in their most people like, either in their third year typically. So yeah, you do have that shorter time frame. For me, my personal experience, I think I kind of had this idea like I need to do internships beforehand. So when I was in community college, I did do 2 internships and that did help me. I won't like sugarcoat that. So those, were 2 things I did in the past, and they were like internships where I was not paid. And I was lucky I had the privilege to take that on. So that helps me once I got into UCLA. But when I came to UCLA, one thing that, I think a lot of transfer space is that you kind of have to balance like, applying for internships plus like, the whole social aspect of UCLA plus school. There's a lot of different things. And I think I wanted to be involved in like so much that it was like, I think I felt like if I didn't do XYZ, I would feel like my experience wasn't going to be as, memorable or as good. So my advice to individuals who are transferring or have transferred in is to kind of know that kind of create a plan for yourself of like these are the this is what I have to manage this quarter, whether it's for academics, work that you have clubs and organizations, and then internship, applications or internship if you're doing an internship that quarter, kind of being able to manage your time. And then also know that if something doesn't go as planned, that's fine. I think a lot of people have this unfortunate notion at schools like UCLA or other, elite, quote unquote elite schools, right? That, if you don't get, people will say if you get a job at Bain, that's like so amazing, whatever. But like, not everyone's going to get their dream job out of college. I know I didn't. And there's always a second job and a third job to take. So just know, as long as you're kind of, on the path to bettering yourself and whatever that is, like, you're going to be fine.
Awesome. That was great. Cool. So I think the next question everybody should have an answer as well. That question is, do you feel like your UCLA academics, programs and or organizations prepared you for your current role? If so, are there any like specific ones? So any specific classes or clubs or et cetera? And then long question, if not, are there any non-UCLA resources that were helpful? Sorry for how long it is. Nicole, do you want to go?
Yeah. So I was an econ major, and I would say that barely prepared me for my role. Just because econ is just very specific. And I think that's a big part of like going to college, is your curriculum is oftentimes very specific. And it's like in sort of a bubble, like in that classroom environment where you're not really hands-on and you're not really learning things that are going to be beneficial to you in the future. The reason I chose to do econ was because I thought that it was just like good things to know for the future, just to have in your mind. But I kind of went into it knowing that it wasn't going to give me any like real life hands-on practical information. So I kind of went into it with that in the back of my head. So I would say like the thing that was extremely helpful for me was doing like small internships, joining clubs, meeting people. So I don't know if you guys have heard of Duffel on campus, the snack delivery service that is like seemingly born after COVID. But when they were just starting up, I worked for several months. And so I did like a lot of there, and I just like a variety of parts of this. And so that, if anything, taught me more than
Nicole, are you there?
Sorry, I am there. My sucks.
Yeah, maybe you can go audio only if that improves it. If not,
No, yeah, that's true.
or we could all go audio
Is
only.
this better?
Maybe
Is this better?
Yeah, could you like
Okay.
retrace from maybe the last 10 seconds?
Sorry. Yeah. Where do you remember what I said before I cut off?
Talking about Duffel, and then I didn't know what you said.
Oh, no worries. Sorry, my Wi-Fi is just not great today.
You're good.
Sorry. So with Duffel, I was able to intern with them. So I kind of like did a lot of different things in that business. I watched them go through Y Combinator. So it was like just a ton of different work. And I think that was the place where I learned the most. And it was a lot more than I had been learning in my econ classes. So like my advice is you're going to learn the most from your internships. You're going to learn the most by networking. You're going to learn the most just by like meeting a ton of different people. And then like ultimately a lot of people go into their like roles and their jobs not really knowing a lot. And so you're going to learn like the most on the job is probably like, the biggest.
Awesome.
There.
Flav.
Yeah. So Justin, again, was like, what resources helped us at UCLA?
Yeah, if any, and then if not, were there any like non-UCLA ones that stood out to you?
Gotcha. Yeah. As far as resources that help me like directly with my job, I don't think there wasn't like an Excel modeling course that I took that was like direct. Actually, there was some Excel like this real estate. I forgot who teach. It was like Kaplan or something like that. Some like real estate CEO dude that taught at UCLA. There was some Excel there, but nothing like directly, even like from a software perspective. I would say I would have, Nicole, I love you. I would say though that I did love the econ major, and I thought it was much more. The reason I loved econ because it was much more broader, because you can apply it to every single industry. And in my particular case too, especially when you see COVID, like the economy is always like it's like making headlines all the time now. Like businesses are shutting down. That's when the economy makes headlines, and businesses are shutting down. Economy's doing well, you know, they hear too much like about it. But it just helped me because at the end of the day, it comes like from corporate finance perspective, all perspective, it comes down to the buyer, the seller, and then the transaction. Every transaction is composed of the buyer, seller, the product or service, the time period, and the size of the cash flow, whether it's the lemonade stand or if it's business to business. And I think like it kind of like grounded my fundamentals there, but also it just helped me deal with the multivariable situation. So anyone else that's here as an econ major, just remember it'll always be multivariable. Like if you hear someone say, oh, well, like this company's going to do great because of this single variable, I call that one dimensionalizing issues, or one dimensionalizing the business, or one dimensional person people. Like remember, like we're multi-dimensional. Like you're economists, like look at GDP, there's the 4 different components of GDP, like, and even within those components you have other components, and it's the same thing with the business. It's very multivariable. So if there's something that I grab from econ, it's like how dynamic an organization, an industry, or well, a business is, an industry is, a market is. But yeah, other than like specific, yeah, honestly, it's tough. Like, like honestly, just my friends, because I still talk to my friends that are in finance or actually in different industries. Like that's a resource. It kind of going back to the network, like that Nicole and Grace have talked about. Like that's a resource that you have at UCLA. That's a resource you'll have after you got your birthday. You know, like when you're interviewing for jobs, like forever. So those are resources like I'll always go back to, because if there's one thing I've learned, no one person has an answer. World's too complex. Even if you do figure it out, it changes the next day, and your information is immediately out of date. So, yeah, that's my answer.
Awesome. That was amazing. Gracelyn, if you wanted to chime in.
Sure. So I guess to keep it short, I would say that for me, when it came to my classes at UCLA, whether it was, you know, especially specifically the business classes, I don't think those helped me that much, to be very honest with you. I think for me, it was what really shaped me was the internships that I did throughout UCLA, my first job out of school, and then the people I met at UCLA, and learning how to not only network, but just build like genuine connections, and whether that's connections or friendships, and being able to talk to people and be confident talking to people. I think that's what has really helped me. And like I think that will push you through rather than like necessarily like the academics. I think academics is important, but you know, putting something on paper is very different than when you have to apply it in to your work. So I think, yeah, so that was just my personal experience.
Awesome. Great. So for the next 3 questions, they're sort of targeted towards one of you, and I'll obviously let you know who that is. But just to let you know, it's just gonna be like a 1-to-1. Not everybody will have to answer each question. So yeah, Nicole, I think you had a pretty outstanding GPA, especially compared to mine. So I was wondering like how you approach studying for classes and exams. Like what was your strategy on that?
Let me know if I cut out here, just because my internet is like not being great. But yeah, my major, as Flavius probably knows, was not the easiest. There were a lot of times where I was definitely not very sure of myself, and the way that I would perform in the class. So I would say that my method was not the most sustainable method, but it was the one that worked for me. And I really want to emphasize that, because not everybody studies the same. And so it's really about understanding what works best for you. For me, it was like studying pretty much all day for a whole week before an exam, and going to office hours, making sure that you're getting all of your questions answered. Especially like in econ, you know, you're oftentimes like just trying to make sure that what you have in your head is legit, and like it's not, you know, you're kind of questioning yourself every single second. So going to office hours and asking those questions, even if they were really dumb, was really, really important for me to sort of sort my head out and make sure that the things that I'm thinking of in my head are actually real and not just something that I, you know, made up or created. So office hours, super crucial, but also just like trying to understand the way that you work and the way that you study. And that took me a while. Like in high school, I definitely had no idea how to study. And I think honestly, transferring from community college was the help that I needed, because that's kind of where I started to better understand the things that work for me.
Awesome. That's great. So next question is for Flav. Seeing how you have and still are, and I'm assuming we're at UCLA, sort of a social butterfly. I was curious, how do you go about making friends, but also maybe how do you like dive a little deeper and make meaningful connections, because you meet all these different people at school, right? But a lot of the times I think maybe they don't like go anywhere. Like you'll say hi to them in the hallways, which is fine, but you know, how do you make those meaningful connections?
It definitely wasn't the face. I needed a lot more work here. So I had to work on a lot of my personality, because
The
this year
cut,
needs a lot of work.
is there.
I think that's such a great question. No one's ever asked. People are always like, oh wow, like thank you for like connecting me to this person, because like throughout I feel like my career at UCLA and after, like I've always been good at like saying, oh, you should meet this person, or like, oh, let's all hang out. Like I'd always be like the one who'd be like, oh, let's grab dinner. And then like when we're grabbing dinner at like BCAF, like 5 other people, they're like, what the heck are these people? Like some people are like, what, dang, there's hella people here, we're gonna sit. But I was always big on like, let's grab, like, cause no one's like eat food. Like, I don't know, I never like just like eating by myself. Just I want to talk or something like that. But I think one is I never felt like I need to like be like, let me tell you about how great. There are some people that are so good at telling about how great they are, what skills they have, what talents they're good at, XYZ things and why they're amazing. Like I feel like I don't really do that. I feel like for me, like number one, I'm always just like genuinely curious about people's careers. Like even my friend who's like, you know, Jay Miller, he
Yeah.
does like sales for a bus company, but it's a technology bus company. So like I'm asking, like, dude, like, so like, how do you guys optimize bus routes, or like, how do you like decide, okay, these locations we go to, what locations get added to the funnel, kicked off the funnel? Like, so I'm always asking, man, dude, no one's ever like asked me about buses, but like, it's amazing how you're interested in it. And I'm just like, that's one, like, just like a genuine curiosity. And I've always did that too, like ask about their family. You know, I'm always happy to talk about my family. Like I grew up in a well, I think that also includes that. Like, I come from a big Filipino family. I have 6 siblings. I lived in a 2-bedroom, 1-bathroom house. So I had my auntie live with me too. So we had 10 people in like this little 2-bedroom, 1-bathroom house. So I'm networking every second. I'm waiting to go to the bathroom. I'm networking. I'm like in the kitchen. I'm at the dinner table. I'm sharing the bed with like 3 of my brothers. Like networking 24/7. So I think that played a role. I'm okay now, fortunately. My brothers don't sleep with me. I'm in like Napa right now. But I think, yeah, really just like showing curiosity, like asking questions, like being curious about like their whole background, like not these like surface level BS like questions, but and that requires you to also, it's just a good thing. Like, and it goes back to the whole concept of like, you don't know everything. So if you think like my value is because I know way more than everybody else, like people will catch on to that, and they just don't like that. And I think well, end on this is like don't, like if you're like look at someone like and you're thinking like, oh, like I don't think they want to talk to me, like, or like I'm afraid to talk to them, like they're thinking the same thing. They look at you. I used to wrestle in high school, and my coach still just told me like I know you're probably scared to wrestle him, but he's like equally as scared. Like you guys are both nervous. So I just took, and I remember like when I was at UCLA, like my first like day there in the like transfer conference, where like they put everyone in a room, like everyone's scared. So like if you can just like own that and know that they're also feeling some sort of anxiety, like talk, just go in there, introduce yourself, smile, and just start that conversation. So I think that's I'll come up with a better, more concise formula, but that's kind of like a general framework of like how I've framed my social interactions.
Awesome. Going back to that multivariable aspect there with the formula. That's great. I was also like super curious to ask you that in general. But to ask you that here, because I don't think we've ever talked about that. But
we never have.
yeah, that's really cool.
Make sure you laugh at people's jokes too. They love that.
Oh, yeah.
No, yours are real. When I'm laughing, Justin, when you make a joke, those are genuine, by the way.
No. No, but yeah, I mean, what Flav's been saying is very true. He's honestly like one of the like the most genuine, caring people I met at Skyline. Just to like as an aside, he like took me to like I want to say like Wingstop.
We did go to
Celebrate when I got to UCLA, maybe. So yeah, that was really great, and I still think back to that like when I see him sometimes. So that's awesome. Gracelyn, for your question, since you had that great run of internships during your time at UCLA, I mean before UCLA. I was curious, like how you went about preparing for recruiting for internships, and then maybe could you walk us through maybe the timeline of applications to offer, maybe any hurdles there were, any wins there were on the way.
Mhm. Sure. And Justin, sorry about this. I think with my internet connection, the first question you asked cut off. So do you mind repeating yourself?
No worries. That's fine. Yeah, so I was just curious, like for your internships, like both before and during UCLA, how did you prepare, walking us through the timeline of application to offer and any like challenges or wins during that?
Okay, yep. So I think when it came to preparing for applications, before I was at UCLA, when I was in community college and doing internships, it's been so long, but to be honest with you, you're so young in your career, your college career at that time, that I was like, okay, like I have time to apply for internships, whatever. But I did know I was lucky enough that when I was a sophomore transferring into UCLA, I knew I needed some type of thing to do that summer between. So I was like reaching out to people. I didn't have the UCLA network at the time. I was literally using like my community college. I think we had like an internship program or something to like look at people, and going on like internships.com. And I had a really crazy internship experience working for like a crazy boss between that year. So I learned that not everyone it's working. The real world is not always nice. So I learned that. But then I guess in terms of timeline, once I got to UCLA, typically the main like internship cycle starts in the fall, right? So when it comes to that, is like my advice would be going to go to networking events, and more than the networking events, actually apply. I think it's changed. I believe you guys apply to jobs on Handshake now. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Yep. So apply to your internships on Handshake. That will, if you have a decent, resume, whether you know someone or not, I think it's always helpful to know someone at the company or reach out to them. But oftentimes, because you're at UCLA, if you have a decent resume and you have certain, you kind of can check certain boxes, there's a good chance that you're going to get an interview. So I think just, being kind of prepared to apply during the fall is most important. But with that being said, if you're not able to, like, there will always be other opportunities in the winter and even spring. Just know that a lot of like the bigger companies tend to do recruiting for the fall, just because, that they kind of secure people's offers for the following summer at that point.
Awesome. Really appreciate that. I know these questions may be a little bit more targeted, personal. So that was really cool to hear. Yeah, so now it's like around 8:10. Kind of switch to the Q&A portion. So the audience has already submitted some questions, but if you guys have any other questions, feel free to submit them to the chat, and Kyla will sort of facilitate this. So I'm going to pass this off to Kyla. Once again, she is our new president for the club. Yeah, awesome. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Justin, and thank you all three of you. It's been so great learning more about like your journey, and how I think what's been most surprising, or not really as surprising, is just like Flav noted earlier, how like human everyone is, and that's what I appreciate most, because I think as a transfer, it's kind of like elusive, like whatever internship, post grad, like how you conduct yourself, what the culture is like. So I just wanted to personally thank all three of you. And so what our first question is from Vanessa, and one of them, it's, do you all recommend getting an internship your first year as a transfer, or as soon as you begin to get more experience?
Yeah, I think it's important to just at least try to get an internship as soon as you can. And I think another piece of that is like, don't get discouraged if you don't immediately get an internship, and don't get discouraged if you don't get an internship at like a big name company. I think that a lot of times you'll hear people say like, you have to have a big company on your resume or no one's going to consider you. That's not really true, especially when you're starting out in your career. And I think that kind of advice is really discouraging, if anything. So I would say like, take on like anything that you're interested in, even if it's small, even if it's unpaid. If you can, just like try to dedicate a little bit of time into that, because you never know what you're going to learn, and you never know who you're going to meet. And I think like sometimes those really random experiences and relationships are what kind of take you to the next level. So don't sell yourself short is, I'd say, the biggest piece there.
Bob and Gracelyn, if you want to add anything onto that as well, feel free. Okay, cool. Our next question is, how important is your GPA when being hired, from Sylvia?
I can take that. So when it comes to your GPA, I think the honest answer, it depends. I think that some bigger companies, like, and maybe Nicole, you have more insight into this. Some bigger companies like consulting or potentially investment banking, sometimes they will check, like they will ask to have a GPA on your resume, and some do check transcripts or will ask you to submit transcripts. But the majority of other companies outside of that, the chance that they care that much about you having a perfect GPA is usually not on top of their list. I think sometimes if you have a bad GPA that maybe like, not bad, but like maybe under 3.0, I think that's something that there could be questions raised. But typically I think most companies, it's something that they might check, but I don't think it's a deal breaker, what your GPA is for most companies as a whole.
Amazing, thank you. And then I actually have a question myself. So I'm starting to navigate conversations about negotiating salaries, or what type of salary should you expect as a person entering the workforce. So I was just curious, from all three of you, what resources did you turn to? Who did you turn to? And how did you go about having those conversations when you're talking to recruiters or a possible hiring manager?
Yeah, I was just in a conversation actually 3 months ago when I first got my job, and they're like super uncomfortable when you like when at least when I first started working. It's like, dang, like how much am I worth? It's like oh, I don't want to give them too high of a number. Like I don't want to sound greedy. So I would like talk to like actually my buddy who like I mentioned earlier, he's a recruiter. So definitely like talk. Like if you're not talking to a recruiter, you will get taken advantage of so easily. They will say, you know what? Is it Kyla or Kayla?
It's Kyla.
Is that, you know what? Kyla didn't do her research. I want to make sure she gets the bottom. Here's the range. She's getting this, maybe even below the range because she didn't do her research. That's what they're saying. But I think, and I know they'll speak to it in more detail, but for me, like I did, well, one was just look at the like there were some like resources I used. I honestly forgot like the websites my friends sent to me, where like I input my number of years of experience, my function, like what city, industry, because there's like the 4 inputs. There's probably more inputs that will calculate that final output, that salary that you want. And that was one, talking to my buddies, and then like I think like the first one I was talking to a recruiter, you can kind of give them a range, but I always ask them to like, what's the salary band? And then like I'll tell my buddies like this is the band, and then they always say ask for the highest. And I always like for this last one, I was like, I don't know, like I was telling him, like, I don't know, like that sounds like a lot. He's like, well, dude, if you're doing what you're doing right now, they're definitely not going to give it to you. So just stick with one number. Say this is it. Like when they ask, okay, what's your amount? X amount total comp. That's it. Don't do the X amount total comp. But if you need flexibility, like right when you use the word but, you just threw everything out that you said before that, because you used the word but. They're like, oh well, okay, I can negotiate with her. I can take advantage of her, which we're not gonna allow that to happen, especially if I find out. If I find out they're gonna do that, you call me immediately. But yeah, that's my view. I'll let them go into more detail.
And then I think I'll touch it just to kind of touch on Flav. I think Flav, what you were kind of for your experience,
All
that
right,
was more
Flav,
so.
okay.
Flav. I'm
Yeah,
sorry. I'm
no
so sorry,
worries.
Flav. I was like, wait, Flav, from your experience, just to kind of to touch on that, this is more so once you've been in kind of the quote unquote working world for a few years, correct?
Yeah, that's true. That's true. So
Okay.
to contextualize that.
Yeah. So one thing that I do want to point out with that's kind of tough is that when you are kind of looking to get your first job out of college is very different than once you're going from your first to your second job forward, right? When it comes to salary negotiation. So the first thing is that when you're kind of going from, college to your first job, unfortunately, whether you have internships or no internships, people are going to say there are so many people who are interested in this role. What is it that you bring that you need that we should pay you X more? So unfortunately, there's not as much wiggle room when it comes to negotiating salary from college to your first job. So I think you have to really be able to point out if you're going to ask for $5,000 more or $10,000 more, it can't be like, well, I just like think I should get paid more money, right? It needs to be, you have to say, you have to literally, you might have to show a recruiter market data, or might have to say, for the cost of living in this city, I feel like this is more, you have to have something to back that up rather than, say, I feel like I'm a great candidate for this role, because they're going to come back to you and say, well, there's a lot of great candidates coming from a college pool, right? And then I think the second thing is that, some people are really like nervous about salary negotiation, whether that's from college or I think, once you're in your first role going to your second role forward, I think know that if you can ask for more money in a meaningful way, where it's not like, I don't think that this is enough money, how much more, if you can, ask in a meaningful way, the chance that a company is going to cut you from that process is slim to none. And if they do, they're probably not a good company to work for in the first place. You just saved yourself from being in a toxic work environment. So I think know that you can ask for more money, but you have to know why you're asking for that. And you have to kind of be able to explain yourself, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. And that definitely helps, especially knowing, I think my concern always when I'm looking at the salary is the cost of living.
Mhm.
And it definitely is different, coming from undergrad to your first job and then bouncing off from that, whether you're transitioning into a new company or you're staying within the same company waiting to get bumped up. Well, our next question is, how should we approach networking with working professionals when we have relatively little to offer as a student or as an entry level person at the moment?
Yeah, I think that the latter part of that is like goes to that like selling yourself short piece. Never assume that you don't have anything to offer, because regardless, you do. Like it may not be work experience, it may not be like in a professional setting, but you always have something. And just I would say like really just think about like any of the experiences you've had. I will honestly say that when I was interviewing for my current role, some of the experiences that I had in community college were what helped me land the role, because I had a unique perspective and I had a unique experience that other people didn't have. And that was something that the company really valued. So regardless, you can turn anything into something positive. And so I think it just, all you have to do is like sit down and just really think about what you've been through. Think about the stories you can tell. And it can be something super small. I think when you're networking with someone, when you're just talking to someone, whether it be a recruiter or whether you're doing like an experience share, making sure you have like a cool rapport going, making sure you're being conversational is really crucial. I think that's like the best way to make your mark and make yourself known. It's just being kind and just having a good conversation, even if you don't have a ton of experience.
I'll just add to once you're like at the company, wherever you're at, networking will still continue. Like you'll still have to network within your organization. So like from an advantage perspective, like that'll just help you understand the business much better, make you help you draw better decisions. Make better decisions, draw better conclusions. But then on the flip side too, just don't do anything stupid too, because I've had like interns join companies and they just like get hammered at the happy hours. They'll say inappropriate things. Like you'll hear these stories like, that'll never happen. Like, it'll never be me. But that it actually happens. It's like, dude, what? They're like under 21. They're drinking. Or honestly, I'm cool with that. Like I'm like whatever. You guys want to have a good time. I get it. But it's the ones that are like they'll say something dumb or like do something stupid. I'm like, oh my god. So your reputation, it takes years to make and seconds to break. You can throw away the key to your reputation just like that. So it's just something that always take into consideration when you're networking.
I really, really like how you put that. Years to make and seconds to break, because there's definitely been situations like that. Not with me, but with other people, and it just makes you turn your head the other way, right? And I think for that question too, I also wanted to add on to Nicole's. I think something that this summer I experienced was we're young and people who are older than us value our perspective because we know what's going on, right? We're the freshest out of the pool. So I think that's also really, really valuable to keep in mind based on what Nicole said as well. And so one other question we had is, what would you do differently in undergrad?
I can take it, or go ahead.
Oh, go ahead. I was going to say nothing.
Okay.
I was just going to say nothing. I love that. Go ahead,
Nothing. Yeah. So I think one thing I would do differently, and I almost hate that I think this, but it's something I still think to this day sometimes, is that when I was in community college, in order to transfer to UCLA, you need to have, typically a pretty high GPA, right? And that is whatever kind of, and that's based on whatever major you're applying with, whatnot. So I think I studied a lot in community college. And then once I got to UCLA, I'm like, great, I'm here. And to be honest with you, if I had to it's ironic because you're going to UCLA to go to school, but like if I had to prioritize or think about what were my priorities were like my internships and my work, my social life, and academics were probably at the bottom, which is good and bad. So I think for me, I didn't prioritize the GPA piece as much. So my GPA wasn't bad, but I do know had I studied a little bit more, it could have been higher. And usually, like I mentioned before, GPA doesn't matter, but it does matter if you are applying to grad school, specifically like law school, med school, business school. And that can really help when it comes to getting into the school you want, scholarships, whatnot. So I would just say I do wish I could have maybe allocated the time to actually saying okay, I want to study to get a good a high GPA, but that's just me. But overall, I will say it hasn't affected me at all since I've kind of been, in the quote unquote real world.
Thank you. Okay. And then I believe this is our last question, and it's specifically asked by a senior. So how would you recommend seniors go about the job search, specifically like shotgun, targeted, a mix of the two?
Come on, Nicole, let's hear it. How'd you do
Thanks for putting me under the bus there. No, I'm just kidding.
it?
Um, it's honestly tricky because everyone is sort of in a different place and like going on a different path and looking to different industries. What I will say though is like networking and taking advantage of on-campus resources is huge. That's kind of where our firm pulls people, especially from undergrad, although I'm not working very closely on the undergrad side, but it's kind of like the same across the board at Bain. Certain schools have dedicated recruiters and people who are working and whose job it is to find talent at specific universities, and UCLA is one of them. So I would say going to the career center, making sure that you're connected, making sure you're aware of deadlines, because deadlines always change. Specifically in consulting, deadlines are kind of crazy and all over the place. Like right now, we're already interviewing people for next year. So just making sure that you kind of know what's going on in your specific industry, making sure you're up to speed, making sure you're meeting with people, making sure you're taking advantage. I think those are all really, really crucial when you're a senior trying to find a full-time role. And it kind of depends on what you want to do, but for a lot of big firms and big companies, they have very specific timelines. So I think it's really easy to miss that. So just like staying in the loop as much as possible. And I think going back to what Flav said earlier is like having a group of people who you can go to recruiting events with, having that group who's like, hey, by the way, like this deadline's coming up, like fill in your application. That's all super duper important.
Yeah, I like what people have said previously too about like don't worry about like the big name, because the company I went to is like 200 person company, small size. It was good though because it's the CFO, director of finance, and myself. So if you're worried about like again kind of going to the cocktail party and saying, oh, I work for this company, and people not feeling impressed, like even if you did work for that great company, the feeling of someone feeling impressed, like it'll only make you feel so good for so long. Like you're the one who actually has to do the job from 9 to 5 or 9 to X time, like Monday through Friday. Like don't do it just so you can on Friday night when you meet someone and you say, oh, I work at like XYZ, and they go, wow, that's it. And then like, wow, really? Like the time distribution and the trade-off, it's a bad trade-off. But one thing that I also did too, like I didn't do it when I was a senior, but when you do find companies that you like, just like find the name of the company, then go into your LinkedIn search bar, type in the name of the company, then type in recruiter and just add the recruiters and then email every one of them. Because if you just like go on the company website and submit an application, it's a little more difficult than if you like go on to like a company website. I'm sorry, go on LinkedIn and connect with someone individually. So you can get somebody on the phone and talking, just because like that'll like get the ball rolling more. And secondly, just make sure you look through job descriptions, because some companies will do a fantastic job representing what the role is, and some are just like totally twisting the truth. The reason I know this is because again, I just got my job like 3 months ago, and I was interviewing for a while, looking through all these different JDs. Like you look at the job description, you hop on the call, and what they say and what the JD says, like those totally don't match. So make sure it's like something that has keywords that you want to be doing from a corporate finance perspective. If it just says like reconcile data or like manipulate data sets or pull data sets, like that's probably not something that you want to be doing all day long. But if there's something about strategy or something about building models and forecasts, like if it doesn't have like those words or analysis and like different types of analysis that you can run, trend analyses, variance analyses, concentration analyses, there's like 11 main types, like just go down that list. That'll help you a lot. And then lastly, if you're really interested in corporate finance, or actually even in like, I guess banking and consulting as well, there's this website called the Corporate Finance Institute. it's like the #1 rated like platform, like learning platform, e-platform. I know this from as a user perspective because I took it. It's like a 3-month course that I took prior to my current job, but it helped me like kind of ramp up my modeling skills in order to get this current job. So like those types of skills, because like you might have to go a case study that requires you to build out a model. Those type of skills you can acquire from like different learning platforms.
Awesome. Yeah, I know we're at time, so just like give a gigantic thank you to everybody who came out, but especially the panelists. I know for many of you, I asked fairly last minute, so I really appreciate this. I know all the new transfers and also the rising seniors are really going to benefit from all the sage advice that you guys offered, so that was great. Not sure what the vibe is, but if you guys have maybe an extra, 5-10 minutes, and there's anybody in the audience that wants to interact one-on-one after this event sort of soft ends, feel free to stay. If not, I know on the calendar it said it ends at 8:30, so totally respect your time and understand if you have to leave. But yeah, thanks everybody for coming out. If you weren't here at the very beginning, please check out our website, bruintransfersandbusiness.com. That's where you can find our Discord channel, our mailing list, and all of our social media pages, and also learn a little bit more about what we do as a club. So yeah, I mean, that's pretty much it. Thanks for coming. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks everybody. Thanks for setting this up.